The business of college sports, as you knew it, is over. In its place, a high-stakes, high-revenue game where performance off the field matters more than ever. That's where ADC Partners comes in. We help athletic departments navigate this new era, boosting revenue, unlocking value, and building smarter strategies. From naming rights and stadium financing to multimedia rights and sales training, ADC has done it all at every level. Looking to win off the field? Then turn to ADC Partners, your trusted college sports business partner. For more information, visit adcpartners.com.
Hey, this is Kevin White, former Duke Athletics Director and author of The Good Sport, and this is the Sports Business Conversations podcast from ADC Partners.
If you're paying attention to the business of college sports today, it's hard not to be overwhelmed by all the so-called experts telling you they have the answers to what's going to happen next. In this attention economy, loud and outrageous voices often win the day. It's honestly exhausting. That's why when you talk to Kevin White, it's an opportunity to break through all that noise and hear from someone who has almost always been in that room where it happened. White's career in college sports is legendary, to put it mildly. The longtime athletic director has shaped college sports programs at stops including Tulane, Arizona State, Notre Dame, and ultimately Duke University, where he spent 13 years guiding the Blue Devils. In his characteristic, straightforward style, White provides insights about the state of college athletics and the lessons he's learned along the way, many of which can be found in his recently published book, The Good Sport. We go into his career, his evolved opinion on NIL, the role of the NCAA in the future of college sports, and why he thinks now more than ever is the time to lean in on DEI in college sports. We'll also find out how his thumbs are feeling after writing The Good Sport entirely on his iPhone. So thanks for checking out my conversation with Kevin White, the former athletic director of Duke University and author of The Good Sport. I hope you enjoy. Kevin, you began your athletics leadership at Loras College, a Division III school located in Iowa. I think it was in the mid-'80s. And can you talk about, to get started, that initial role that you had in college athletics and taking the reins of a program like that for the first time? What are your core memories of being an athletic director for the first time?
You know, Dave, as I reflect back, and I've done a lot of that with the Good Sport, I'm thinking about my journey, my career. I was a track and field coach largely, and I coached a little high school football and wrestling as well in the 70s. And then I found myself moving from basically collegiate track and field to Loras College, Catholic institution in Dubuque, Iowa, actually at the diocesan school in 1982.
All right.
And I was perhaps one of the youngest people on the staff.
How old were you at that time?
31.
Okay, you were young.
Without any real, I think, experience in administration. At Southeast Missouri State as a track coach, I had some assignment responsibilities in development, in home contest management, and marketing and some other things. But I really was not an athletics administrator. And on day one at Loras, I became one, and I became the leader and all the responsibilities that came with that. And for me, that was an eye-opening experience.
Oh, yeah.
And I relied heavily on an association called NACDA, National Association of Collegiate Directors of Athletics. And I jumped into that organization out of absolute necessity. Okay, what am I supposed to be doing with this?
What am I doing?
I was a long way from stopwatches and batons. Yeah.
But following Loras, I mean, so you obviously had some initial success there. And then you went on to lead some of the most consequential and prominent athletic programs in the country. Maine, Tulane, Arizona State, Notre Dame, and ultimately Duke University. And I'm wondering, like, when you think back on Loras, what were the foundational skills that you developed there that continued to apply to all those other institutions as you rose through the ranks of college athletics? What did you continue to go back to the well on that you developed at Loras?
Dave, I really do believe, and I've thought about it here since I stepped down from the AD position now 4 years ago.
Yeah.
I've had a lot of time to think about that foundational piece. And for me, I think, and I learned it quickly at Loras, I had a lot of political theory and leadership theory in graduate school. But then at Loras, I had an opportunity to implement that theory. And so I kind of figured out how to blend, I think, under fire, the relationship between leadership and political acumen. And today I continue to think and talk about it in the course that I teach, an MBA course. And by the way, on September 8th, I'll start my 44th year teaching this class.
Look out, undergrads. Here it comes.
Here it comes. So it's all graduate.
Graduate level. All right.
Yeah. And I talk to them about, the intersection of leadership and politics. And quite frankly, let me digress and just say you can't be the leader unless you can effectively manage all the competing political forces. And you can't manage all the competing political forces unless you are the leader. And those things are like, they're married. And I think I learned that, so to speak, objective at Loras, and then took it to Maine and Tulane and Arizona State and of course Notre Dame and then on to Duke. So I think that's kind of what my foundational piece is, and I talk a lot about it in The Good Sport.
And I think it's safe to say that university campuses have a lot of competing interests in that regard, right? I mean, both within an athletic department, but also by the surrounding university. So managing to your point, politics is integral to being an effective leader, isn't it?
It absolutely is. And, and I think about higher education generally, Dave, is highly political.
Yeah.
There is nothing quite as political as college athletics on a campus, and perhaps within society. Everybody thinks they can do it.
Yeah.
And you've got a lot of constituency groups that kind of need to be navigated and if not led to an objective or a certain place. It's really a challenge, and it's never ending because the constituency groups that's a mammoth number of folks who, from fandom to investors and everybody in between, notwithstanding student athletes, coaches, and faculty and staff. Everybody wants in the game. Yeah, it's the toy store.
Not too many deans of physics departments have people looking over their shoulder and say, well, why did you do that? And I'm not sure. I guess second guess that decision. And that's a far cry from an athletic director. There are a lot of people watching what's going on.
And or a coach and anybody involved with college athletics. I mean, there's so much public consumption of the enterprise that it's easily kind of, dissected. And everybody wants to be a recreational athletics person. I mean, it is, I call it cynically, Irish New York cynicism at its worst. It's a toy store. Yeah. And everybody wants to come into the toy store.
It's got all the fun stuff.
But a lot of people don't understand the rhythm and connectivity of everything that goes on in the toy store.
Does that dynamic tension between athletics, some of the universities I've been to, like that exists. Like there's a dynamic tension between the academic side of the university and the athletic side of the university. Is that a common thing? Is it an exceptional thing that happens at some schools? And how do you navigate that as you arrive at those opportunities?
I think it's ever present at every institution at some level. It's amazing. Some of these large, monolithic, big public universities with enormous fan bases tend to be highly political, mostly from the external side, but the mission's pretty clear and distinct that we're going to support this thing and we're going to compete at the highest level. Other schools, smaller schools, and that's what's interesting about the NCAA, another digression. It's like the bar scene from Star Wars, different size, shapes, and colors. Division 1, 2, 3, public, private, big market, small market, and the rest of it. And so that there's not a lot of, consistency of a level of interest and support at those differing kinds of places, institutions along that continuum. So there are places that are pretty schizophrenic even today about college athletics. We can't live with it, can't live without it. And somehow the operation of that has to kind of lay in between both of those polar positions.
For a quick sidebar, that might be the first Star Wars NCAA analogy that's been made on this podcast. So kudos to you, sir. Kudos to
The
you.
bar, whatever it was called. Yeah.
The bar scene and the cantina, actually.
Yeah.
All right.
Yeah.
So my Star Wars obsessed daughter is now somebody's nodding. Thinking, way to go, Dad! You nailed it. Now, Notre Dame and Duke were two of the last stops on your trajectory as an athletic director, and these are two schools that occupy, I think, a fairly unique place in college athletics. Right, both are recognized for certainly their athletic prowess, but also for their academic standing. And so, when you're leading those programs on the athletic side, can you talk about balancing the demands from coaches who are trying to recruit as aggressively as they possibly can, but on the academic side, maintaining those academic standards? Is that a constant battle? Is it an understanding that works on? How do you manage that when you have competing interests in that regard?
It's the ultimate pragmatic tug of war. And it is ever present, particularly at the academically robust and well-branded institutions. And, I've been very fortunate. I've been at, again, Duke and Notre Dame and way back at Tulane. But there are only a handful of schools that are, really serious about academic performance. Really serious. And I'd have to put
that are competing at that level.
Yeah. There's not that many, really. Right. And so finding ways to go out and recruit kids, evaluate kids that can fit academically and athletically within the mission of the institution is an ongoing challenge. And it's at some of the really committed institutions, the challenge is pretty enormous. And at the end of the day, the athletes you bring in have got to compete on the academic side with the kids with perfect test scores.
Right.
And have real strong aspirations academically, and they've got to be competitive in that environment. So I've been really fortunate to be at three really high-end academic schools. And by the way, some of the other schools I was at were pretty darn good as well. Loras College, a small school in Dubuque, Iowa, was pretty darn committed to providing a really good academic experience for students, and students and grads have done really well coming out of that place. I would put Maine, I used to call Maine a public Ivy.
Yeah.
They wanted to be, kind of a sublet of the Ivy system. And we're really serious about academics. And of course, Tulane, I've already mentioned, was a serious player. And then Arizona State was an emerging, and created an honors college within, a mammoth.
Which is exceptional.
Yeah, which is just like an Ivy school within, it's like a Dartmouth in the middle of Tempe, in the middle of Arizona State, which is now 170,000 students. So I've been fortunate to be around a lot of these institutions, but back to the cantina bar scene, they're all a little bit different.
Yeah, it's one of the biggest challenges associated with the NCAA, and one of those friction points that's always going on is you're dealing with what is now the Power Four versus the Lorises and the university in that cadre of schools that are saying, well, how do we fit into this overall paradigm when, particularly now, which brings up the next question, right? You have been an athletic director in, I think, what only can be described as the most tumultuous period of time in college athletics that anybody's ever seen. NIL, conference realignments, money pouring in, certainly from broadcast and soon to be apparently from private equity. What do you feel like were some of the catalysts that got us to this point, that change just seemed to be happening on almost a minute-by-minute basis?
Dave, there's a really good book, and it was published in, I think, 1976. It's called Sport in America by the great American researcher, James Michener, and which is really fascinating. And it's no longer in publication, but you can buy it on the used book online space.
Okay.
But in any event, everything that's happened today, he prognosticated in the early 70s. And some of the old guard that are no longer with us, the giants that mentored me and were really very good to me, Gene Corrigan, I'll throw up as an example, or Ernie. These are Cedric Dempsey, who we just passed. These were giants in college athletics. When I'd be around those guys in the last 20 years or so, or 30, I'd say, who the hell was Michener talking to? How did he know that we were going to play a compression state economic game?
Yeah.
And that's the verbiage I've come up with for my class. We're emulating corporate America. finding ways to amortize more resources across fewer units. And that's what's led to conference realignment. And it's basically a corporate formula. And, I don't see a lot of pundits write about that, but that's clearly what it is. And so that's kind of shaped all the behaviors that we're now dealing with. It was only a matter of time, probably, before we were going to start to distribute some of the resources to student athletes. We've gotten so big and so much resource, and so monetizing all the different entities of the enterprise was probably a necessity about 10 or 15 years ago. And had we done it on our own terms rather than the way it's kind of gone down here as of late, I think we'd be in a better place today. But a lot of us, including me, I'm guilty. We're Neanderthal, and we didn't accept that paradigm change. But it was changing, and we just didn't make an act to kind of get in front of it.
Was there a moment where you think, looking back, that the universities and the NCAA could have managed this moment, could have gotten out ahead of it? Or was it more or less everybody woke up and, oh my gosh, it's NCAA versus House and everything has changed behind closed doors?
I was at a dinner on Tuesday night in New York with a bunch of current and former Nike guys, and that question was posed to me. And, I found myself saying, we had a moment, I think, about, as I just kind of said it, 15 years ago, where we could have gotten out on front of this thing. And we could have created tomorrow, as Peter Drucker might say, but we didn't do that. And so tomorrow was then created by other folks for us. And we've got to live with that. We just didn't have the vision to get there first and to be the first mover.
I think it's safe to say that in the model that you had at that time was performing well for the entrenched, organizational powers that were in place at that time, right? It's just that when the legal challenges started to happen, that flips the script a little bit. Yeah. And it seems like it's kind of caused the NCAA to descend into irrelevance to a certain degree. And does this, with change happening to the NCAA versus the NCAA initiating change, is this new college sports sustainable, right? Can this car be fixed? Or is it time to trade into something new?
Well, great question. And that was clearly a subject of conversation at this dinner I just alluded to this past Tuesday night.
I should have been there. We could have saved time. I mean,
we could have done the podcast.
We could have just hold the microphone up.
Yeah. In the middle of my chicken and what. But I don't know really what the answer is. I mean, I think it's where, everything changes in life. That's one of the, I think, when I'm going to be 75 here shortly. And when I look back at the way things have evolved and changed and will continue to change, I've come to realize nothing stays the same. And I know that, kind of a cliche, but that's true. And so I think we're going to be looking at a much different NCAA in the future. It's toxic at this point. The public opinion has really soured on the national organization or the National Association. But quite frankly, you can't have a college sport landscape without a parental organization. It can't exist.
Something has to police it.
Something has to replace it. And I think it'll be modified. It'll be different. And I think conferences will tend to play larger roles, particularly relative, Dave, to the Power Four. I believe that. And then I think some outside adjunct agencies will develop, not unlike the IRS with the federal government. So enforcement will be kind of a inside-outside organization. I was on the board of the USOPC for 8 years, and we created Safe Sport, which was kind of an adjunct, and it's not directed or led by the USOPC, but it's funded by it, and they support the mission of the Olympic movement. So the same kind of thing is, I think, in college athletics as it relates to the NCAA. I think there'll be some appendages created that will kind of be inside outside, more outside than inside, as we go to the next iteration. And I, you're reading about some of this, but it's not totally vetted at this point. But I think we'll we'll get some more clarity. Charlie Baker's working really hard to reinvent this organization, but it's troubled. And again, it doesn't have a lot of credibility. And that's tough. And he took over at a brutally difficult time.
It took over at a difficult time when power really did seem to shift to the conferences, right?
Yes.
At a time when the NCAA was used to calling the tune. Now the commissioners of the SEC and the Big Ten and the Big 12 and the ACC, they seemed, clearly the SEC and the Big Ten much more so, seem to be calling the tune right now. And that does seem to exacerbate that thing that we were talking about earlier. If it's the cantina before, some of those schools aren't even allowed in the cantina anymore. Exactly. They're on the outside looking in.
Yeah. I mean, and there's multiple cantinas, but the cantina at the top of Power 4 is different than the one that encompasses 1,100 institutions within the NCAA with, Division 3 and 2 and no non-football and the rest of it. I mean, it's just really, there is no proposition that can effectively represent one size fits all. And I think we tried to hold on to that for perhaps way too long. We should have seen that coming as well.
Disruption comes for everybody, apparently.
Yeah, we just didn't have the vision and or the leadership to attack some of these issues before they became tapped.
Do you think there's a role for the federal government in organizing this? Or do you think that they're, like, as you talk about, organizing body and the policing body, and I know that there's been noise about commissions involving Nick Saban and things like that, but should the federal government step in?
I think at this point, I mean, this thing has become really big business.
Yeah.
And I don't know that it can be managed without some kind of federal mitigation.
Yeah.
And if it's antitrust, whatever it is. And the professional leagues that have enjoyed antitrust have really benefited. And even if we're still part of the academy, which I'm a huge proponent of, maintaining college athletics as part of the university or the academy, even if we're part of that, we have become really big business. And let me characterize it for you. I teach at my class, all forms of sport domestically represents about $1 trillion in our country. And it's about 6% of the gross domestic product. All forms of sport in terms of the global economy are between 3 and 4 trillion and about 5% of the global economy. Mm-hmm. I mean, so sport is big business, and college athletics is a fairly sizable segment of that enterprise. And so I think we may absolutely at some point have to have some kind of protective cover in order to operate this mammoth financial speaking piece of the sports economic scene.
I also am struck by the idea that colleges and college sports operated in a certain way for 100 years, let's just call it, right? And this is the way it was done. And then in a span of 5 years or less, was told that the economic system that they'd been built now has to completely change. Yeah. And I'm not sure I'm aware of any other industry that has had its entire economic structure basically thrown to the ground and shattered and have to rebuild it while still in the middle of operating.
Yeah.
And the incipient challenges associated with that are unimaginable.
Well, they're enormous, and and maybe the way we're operating right now isn't sustainable. And so then the question you asked, is it fixable? And I don't think under the immediate way of doing things, the immediate paradigm, it is fixable. So I think we need to accept a hell of a lot more change, pretty dramatic change, to get to a place where it will be then once again sustainable. But I worry, there's 500,000 kids in the NCAA system that are enjoying one heck of an experience. And I'm not objective, but I think it's life-changing.
So
kids don't tell you that.
Yeah. And I look, in 2020, you and I don't know if this is one of the first examples of UNC and Duke working together. You and Bubba Cunningham, the athletic director there, you released a joint statement about NIL. And we're concerned about how it would upset the competitive balance. And part of that statement included this idea of, look, you can dismiss our concerns as a couple of athletic directors who want to maintain the status quo. But given the way that has unfolded, do you feel like the status quo should have been preserved? Or has your opinion shifted on the way NIL is impacting college sports?
I think we all of us are guilty of shifting. Mm. I think NIL on its face value probably had some redeeming value early on, but the human behavior, as I think I anticipated, would get involved. And funny money has made this thing a pay for play situation now. And it's really disrupted any semblance of the level playing field. And, college athletics, I mean, professional sports are designed to have somewhat of a level playing field, even though there's some differentiation in market sizes and the rest.
Sure.
But you can't, if you don't think a level playing field's really important, if not critical, talk to our counterparts in Western Europe. They don't have an NCAA. And so when they compete against one another, they have no idea who's going to show up on the other side of the field. And but they're all responsible for the win or loss headline.
Yeah.
And so they're dying for an NCAA. We can't live with one. And we're thinking, we'd like to jettison the NCAA, and they would like to have it transition over to Western Europe.
I don't know. Can we use maybe the tariffs? We can move it over to.
Yeah, make it part of the package it with the tariff. But they just come over here and studied our crazy NCAA as well. But again, it's hard not to have some kind of a parental organization over top of a pretty massive sporting landscape to not preserve somewhat of this elusive level playing field that we all talk about. But I think we will kill, we will kill the enterprise if we don't preserve it. So I think something like an NCAA has to persist.
Now, you're widely recognized, particularly in your time at Duke, for your efforts to increase diversity and inclusion in college athletics administration, right? You required candidate pools to include underrepresented groups. You helped launch the open door policy for giving diverse populations internship opportunities. I think it's safe to say now that, diversity, equity, and inclusion is clearly under attack at the federal level. So I'm wondering what thoughts or advice you have for today's academic and athletic administrators when it comes to those kinds of issues, when they're obviously clearly something that they're being confronted with.
I'll be really concise on this one. I stay the course in terms of DEI. Take a look at that, at the student athlete population across those 500,000 kids that are in the NCAA system right now. And to provide people that are like them, if not just look like them, and come from the same kinds of backgrounds they come from, underrepresented populations and the rest, I think would be a travesty, to be honest with you. I think we've worked really hard to get to this place in college athletics. And it wasn't that long ago where we didn't have the kind of equity representation that I would think somebody that sees the world the way that I do, which is not for everybody, would have thought was unreasonable. But in any event, we've come a long way. And, we've had a whole bunch of people, Dave, and I did this very braggadocious, so I apologize. We've had like...
That's a podcast. You're the guest. This is where you do these kinds of things.
But we had 39 of our colleagues over all these crazy years. I was an AD 38 years, 39 become ADs. And, people often, talk about that. And we've had
a coaching tree.
Yeah, but we've had great people that were really committed and really talented and whatever. And I'm proud of that, but I'm more proud of the fact that over 30% of them were pluralistic, that were either female and or ethnic minority or both. And, I just think if we don't continue to forge forward on the DEI trail within the collegiate athletics community, that will bite us. I mean, the economics are biting us right now. That will be the next revolution, if in fact we forego the DEI commitment.
Okay, so stay the course is the advice. So we decided you were going to sum it up. Boy, thank you for the longer answer.
Sorry.
Right, because it could have summed it up like that. Now, I'm assuming like this is going to play a role in the good sport. So I want, if you could talk a little bit about the writing of the book. What was the moment that you said, I think it's time to start collecting all the stories and coalescing this thing into a vision?
Yeah, and I'll try to do it fairly quickly because that's a long answer if I'm going to be honest about it, which I have great pride in being a truth teller. I'll take great pride in being a truth teller. I can tell you that in 2022, my wife, Jane, and we were a coaching duet early on in the 70s and the 80s, early 80s. And in any event, She scheduled our 50th wedding anniversary in Dublin, and she had invited all our kids and grandkids, and now that's, we have 5 kids and 16 grandkids, and spouses, that's 28 people. And so we are heading to Dublin in July of 2022. And Anthony Travel, maybe you're aware of Anthony Travel, the foremost entity that's involved with athletics travel in our country. John Anthony gets wind of the fact that we're going to go to Dublin for this event, and we're going to go 2 days early. That he finds out, and so unbeknownst to us, he invites a whole bunch of our former colleagues to surprise us in Dublin, and the number is about 25. And so, in any event, they come to Dublin 2 days before the kids and the grandkids arrive, and way too much red juice and too much Guinness, and a lot of pub conversation.
The number of things that had happened as a result of that.
Yeah, exactly. This is a kind of an extension of Catholic school education, I think, but our Irish Catholic. And then the event, the conversation tended to focus on, you need to write this journey down. We were all part of it. You need to write it down. You need to commit to us that you'll do this. And I kind of poo-pooed it, and it was July, then August, and I got to about September, and I said to Jane, I think I might do that.
Yeah.
So I wrote the whole damn book.
So the seed was planted overseas, and it just couldn't quite shake it.
And it was all but a commitment made by me. I'll take to heart your interest. Let me think about it. September, I start to write the thing, and whatever it is, 65,000 words, 217 pages, I wrote it all on my iPhone. And
no, you did not.
I did, every word. I never used a legal pad, never wrote anything down. And what I did, I'd write it in capsule form, and then I'd go back to colleagues from that era or that situation and say, do you remember this the way that I do? And we did a lot of fact checking. But anyway, I wrote the whole darn thing in about 2 years on my iPhone.
How are your thumbs? Did you
reports writing? I'm on planes. I mean, I wrote whatever I was consumed with it for the 24 months.
So once you kicked the door down, you couldn't stop.
I couldn't stop. And then I have our oldest is the only person not been in college athletics per se. Her name is Maureen Treadway, and she's an English teacher out at Notre Dame Prep in Scottsdale. And I said, Maureen, I'll do the storytelling, and I'll give you a bunch of stuff out of my course that we can put in this book, but I need you to clean it up. Take all my expletives out. Take all my Long Island silly language out.
You took out, just taking out the expletives reduced the word count pretty good.
That was a full-time job. And so she cleaned it up, and it took her a couple months, and the rest is history. And Euron's published it, and it's been great. And one of the great things about it is it's given me an opportunity at this crazy age to reconnect to individuals and circumstances of my past. I'm hearing from a lot of my former athletes and that I coached in high school. And so I coached 9 years AD for 38. And so there are a lot of people along the way,
right,
giving me the opportunity to reconnect with many people. And that was an unintended consequence, but a really good one.
Boo Corrigan, when he was NC State's AD, said this about working with you, and he said, I was always struck by Kevin White's humility and willingness to listen to all sides before making a decision. And I'm wondering, there's so much of your job, like we started talking about, is about leadership. And I'm wondering if you can speak to that comment in particular, because there's no shortage of ego in college athletics. And so humility and listening, I think generally for people who are, I think when we think of some people high up in athletics, they're more about grabbing the microphone and making sure their voice is heard. Yeah. So speak to those qualities and how they've been effective and efficient for you when sometimes people, I think, can misinterpret those as being quote unquote softer kind of things. So how did that evolve?
I don't really know how to react to that. I don't know how other people perceive me or see me over all these years. I mean, I've been fooling around with this stuff for almost half a century, but Boo is very gifted. And, it's interesting, within the ACC, we had the ACC surrounded. Of course, Nina King is at Duke and has taken my position. And Nina and I started at Notre Dame in 2000. So it's amazing. And then Bubba was on our staff at Notre Dame, and he was at UNC, and Boo Corrigan is at NC State, and Bernard Muir, who was just at Stanford,
Yeah.
was on the staff as well. And Alan Green at Pitt was on our staff.
Jiminy Christmas.
Yeah, and Jimmy Phillips, the commissioner of the ACC, was on our staff as well at Notre Dame and Arizona State. And so, I mean, and Stan Wilcox at one point, he just stepped down and retired from the EVP position at the NCAA, was on our staff at Notre Dame and Duke, and then became the AD at Florida State. So, I mean, we've had the ACC thing kind of surrounded, and it's been fun to just to watch all these people kind of emerge. They're very talented. We've had, again, and a lot of those names I just referenced showed up in Dublin. You know, we had a big retirement thing, or they did, the department here at Duke.
Oh.
They had a very nice retirement function set up, and then COVID hit. And so then the retirement moved offshore. 2022. Wow.
you got to go where the options present themselves, man.
Absolutely. Oh, Guinness is better over there.
It's fresher. It's much fresher.
It's much fresher.
Hey, so Kevin, as we wind up, there's obviously a lot of people who see your career and want to just emulate it, right? You know, you've worked at the highest positions within college sports. You have a reputation, I think, that we've been talking about here that, precedes itself. I'm wondering, as you think back to yourself at Loras, take this full circle, what advice would you give to Kevin White on his first day at Loras based on everything you know now? Because that might actually apply to the people who are seeking to emulate what you're doing or have done.
I was a slow starter. I was slow to really embrace the academic side of life for a lot of reasons, and they're all articulated in the good sport, but for lots of different reasons. And then I found my way to St. Joseph's College in Rensselaer, Indiana, and kind of got a footing, and then really got into the Catholic education, coached, and then went to Loras. And I think the foundation I had at St. Joe played really well for me at Loras. And Loras is, the insiders at Loras call Notre Dame Big Loras, and vice versa. They call Notre Dame Little Loras. And so, yeah, but there's a real connection, by the way, historically, it's in the book, between those two institutions. So I think just being fortunate enough to, as I scrambled through adolescence and found my way to some higher ground academically, and then played forward, and I just played through. And so what I tell people, be authentic, be yourself, and dream. And by the way, dream big. My first dream was to be a coach, and I loved my time coaching. And, as people, if crazy enough to listen to me, I think I was a better coach than I was an AD, but I turned out, and track and field in my day wasn't the sport it is today. And I just didn't think I could make a 50-year run out of track and field. And I don't think track and field would have had me for a 50-year run. But in any event, I had taken that part of my professional life serious and interviewed for the head coaching job at New Zealand at 28 years old. And anyway, at a couple of other offshore places, and just decided to, at one point, I'm going to try this administration thing. And I finished a PhD. Loras knocked on the door. I said no initially. They came back a month later, and in a weak moment, I said yes. And I had buyer's remorse for about 3. And loved it. And it had led to 38 years in this business.
Yeah, it sounds like also give yourself the grace of time to a certain degree, right? You don't have to have everything figured out right out of the gate, right? You think you want to do one thing, but keep your eyes open to opportunities as they present themselves.
Yeah, but be authentic and treat others the way you treat yourself, or the way you'd want to be treated, pardon me. Yeah. And, I've got a lot of those things in the book, but I've kind of tried to live by those, and surround yourself with great people. They were all much more talented than I ever was, and their careers have proved that to be true.
I'm with Kevin White. He's the former athletic director for Duke University and author of The Good Sport, which is currently available on Amazon. Definitely worth picking that up and following the journey of one of the most accomplished athletic directors that have ever been in college sports. Kevin White, thank you for the time today. But before I let you go, I'm going to have to put you in the lightning round.
Go ahead, please.
Oh, okay. Well, that seems enthusiastic. We'll see what you're saying at the end of the lightning round.
Ah,
All right. You were, as noted, a sprinter for St. Joseph's College back in the day. What event was your best, and how would you fare in today's ACC championships?
I wouldn't even make I wouldn't make the ninth team.
I didn't even realize you carried 9 teams.
Yeah, no, but I mean, yeah, I would be horrific today. But I enjoyed it very much. I love track and field and became, I think, a student of track and field as I learned how to coach to different events and so forth. And we had some good success at different places, at Central Michigan, at Southeast Missouri.
Oh, yeah. But what was your event? What was your go-to?
I was a short sprinter.
Okay.
And the 100 more than the 200, but I could run the 400.
Oof, and nobody wants to run the 400.
I was pretty versatile.
Mm-hmm.
But I was one of these kids that grew late, and so in like junior high, I was more of an 880 then. And then when I got into high school, I was more of a quarter miler. And then when I got to college, I was a much bigger kid, and I worked my way down to the short sprints. But that would tell you I wasn't very talented. But I loved every second of it.
Jack of all trades.
Jack
of all trades, master of some.
Yeah.
Okay. Now, your family is widely regarded as the first family of college sports, right? Your kids, a lot of ADs, not only in your fork role, but your kids have gone into ADs and coaching roles at different universities and things like that. Obviously, a lot of family pride there. Are family gatherings impossibly competitive?
Yes. And the most competitive player within our family is the matriarch. Jane is fiercely competitive, brutally competitive.
So how does that manifest itself? Is she a trash talker? Is your wife a trash talker?
All trash talkers. Yeah.
Oh my God.
They're all trash talkers. We have a family text that goes on every day.
Yeah.
And everybody in the family over 18 is on the family text. And
all the grandkids and everything.
If you're 18,
it must be chaos.
And that for them, that's almost, for the grandkids, it seems to be more important than that first driver's license or the opportunity to have to be on the family text. And anyway, so the only non-family members on the family text are Nina and Rick King, and who are like our kids. Okay. And Nina was with me since 2000 at Notre Dame, and now she's the top AD going. I mean, she's killing it at Duke. But what an upgrade she is at Duke. But in any event, the trash talking a bit from our kids kind of emulates from their mother, who's ridiculously competitive.
Okay. All right. Last one. What would you say if I told you that I once won my Final Four office pool by picking teams based on which mascot would defeat the other one in battle? Because what beats a Blue Devil?
I don't think anything beats a Blue Devil.
Right. I mean, it's like a magical creature to a certain degree.
It is.
So not surprising.
And intended to be, I think. And it's lived up to that definition, in my humble, non-objective opinion. Yeah.
You can take the man out of the role, but you can't take the role out of the man. Kevin White, very much appreciate the time.
Thank you, Dave. Thanks for having me. It's an honor to be on your show.
Thanks for listening to this episode of the One-on-One Sports Business Conversations podcast. If you enjoyed it, we always appreciate a subscribe, share, comment, or like. And don't forget, you can always find past episodes at adcpartners.com/podcast. This podcast is written, produced, edited, and hosted by Dave Almy. And theme music was composed by Scott Holmes.